Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive architect escapes city chaos to build his dream home in rural Colorado, he expects solitude. What he gets instead is a neighbor with goats, a forged land grab, and a war with the HOA. Property lines are drawn, but this time they're defended with everything he's got. I live alone on 4 acres of land just outside the boundary line of a suburban development in rural Colorado, a place called Fox Hollow Ridge. Sounds idyllic, right? In theory, it should be. I designed this house myself after I walked away from the architecture firm I co-founded. Burnout, lawsuits, incompetent clients, you name it. I cashed out and built my piece. It's a sleek single-story home with big cedar eaves and massive windows that face the Rockies. I don't host barbecues, I don't do neighborhood potlucks, and I sure as hell don't attend HOA meetings, mostly because I'm not a member, and I intend to keep it that way. That's what made it so strange when Hugh Jaxley, my neighbor to the south, and a proud, badge-wearing HOA council member decided to stroll up my driveway like we were old pals. I was pruning the dry hedges along my fence when he waved over the top rail and let himself in through the gate I hadn't even realized was open. Jason, he called cheerily, the kind of cheer that oozes from someone who's about to ask for something they know they shouldn't. He was wearing denim overalls over a polo shirt, somewhere between organic farmer and midlife crisis suburban dad. His boots were clean, too clean. That set off my internal alarm. I stood up and wiped my hands on a rag. "Can I help you, Hugh?" He wasted no time. "I'll get right to it. You've got a patch of land right on our mutual border. Open, flat, not used for anything as far as I can tell. I was thinking it'd be perfect for an expansion. For my goat enclosure." I blinked. "Your what?" He grinned. "Goats, Nigerian dwarfs. Good temperament, great milk production, organic, non-GMO, free range. You know the vibe. HOA is very supportive of community livestock initiatives, but I'm running out of room. Your parcel there, southwest quadrant. That could be a win-win." I stared at him for a second, making sure I hadn't hallucinated this little field trip into Fantasyland. "You want me to just give you part of my land so your goats can stretch out?" "Well," he said, drawing out the word like it was coated in honey, "not give. Lease, maybe. Informal usage. We'd draw up a mutual use clause. Temporary. Flexible." "No." He blinked. "Excuse me." "No, Hugh. That's not going to happen. I own that land outright, every square inch. It's not for lease, it's not for goats, and it's not up for discussion." He dropped the smile for the first time. "It's just sitting there." "That's my right," I replied flatly. "Property ownership isn't a democracy." He narrowed his eyes slightly. "You know, Jason, in Fox Hollow, we have a tradition of neighbors helping neighbors. Sharing. The land serves the community best when it's used." "That's great, but I'm not in Fox Hollow, and my land doesn't serve anybody but me." He let out a small huff like I'd refused to lend him a lawnmower instead of rejecting a land grab. "Well, I just thought I'd try the friendly approach first. Sometimes people forget that property lines are just lines, you know? Boundaries on paper." I didn't smile. "Those boundaries are legal and enforceable. Don't mistake courtesy for uncertainty." He nodded slowly, squinting at the southern fence line as if visualizing his dream goat palace. "Suit yourself, but out here, we tend to work things out in the community, informally. We'll see how it all shakes out." With that, he gave me a mock-friendly clap on the shoulder and walked off down my driveway like a man who thought he'd just planted a seed that was sure to sprout. I watched him go, and for the first time in a while, I had that old familiar itch between my shoulder blades, the one I used to get back in the city whenever someone thought they were entitled to something I'd built. I should have slammed the gate. A week later, I received a letter that made me laugh out loud, then immediately pissed me off. It came in a cream-colored envelope with a Fox Hollow Ridge HOA emblem printed in gold on the corner. I almost threw it away, figuring it was misaddressed, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page of dense legalese dressed up to sound cooperative. At the top, notice of temporary land mobilization for community agricultural utility. I had to read it 3 times to believe what I was seeing. According to the letter, the HOA was exercising what it called a community contingency clause to temporarily repurpose underutilized adjacent land parcels for agro-civic benefit. Translation, they were trying to seize a chunk of my land for Hugh's goddamn goats. The document claimed the land wasn't being actively used and therefore qualified under the HOA's mobilization initiative. It stated that, effective immediately, the southwest corner of my lot would be incorporated into the Fox Hollow Agricultural Program for a period of 90 days, after which the status would be reviewed, signed by none other than Hugh Jaxley and 2 other HOA board members whose names I didn't recognize. I read it twice more just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Nope, this wasn't a request. It was a notification of action. Now I might be many things, stubborn, private, a little antisocial, but I'm not careless with paperwork. I've read my deed and land surveys more times than I can count. My property lies just outside the HOA jurisdiction. Fox Hollow ends at the creek bed, and I'm on the other side. Always have been. I scanned the letter and forwarded it to Debbie Harris, my real estate attorney and longtime legal pit bull. I called her too, just to make sure she opened the email immediately. She laughed darkly after reading it. Jesus, Jason, this is bold. This clause they're referencing, it doesn't exist. Not in their bylaws. Not in any local land use code. They pulled this out of their ass. So they're bluffing. They're doing more than bluffing. This reads like a bad faith attempt to create a paper trail. If you ignore it and they start building, they'll argue you acquiesced. You need to shut this down now. I figured as much, I said, pacing across my kitchen. I'm drafting a cease and desist. I'll have it ready in an hour, but you might want to install cameras. If they're stupid enough to send this, they're stupid enough to act on it. While Debbie prepped the paperwork, I walked the property line, checking the old survey stakes and GPS coordinates. Everything lined up with my documentation. My land, not theirs. No ambiguity, but something gnawed at me. That kind of brazen move from an HOA wasn't just bluster. Hugh had an angle. By the next day, I had motion-activated cameras set up on the south and east fences, high resolution with cloud backup. I installed floodlights too, just in case things went nocturnal. 2 days after that, a white pickup idled by the edge of the field for 15 minutes. The driver didn't get out, just sat there, staring. I walked toward him slowly, arms crossed. He pulled away before I got close enough to see his face. Then came the inspectors. 3 men in khakis and reflective vests showed up at the southern fence line with clipboards and laser rangefinders. They didn't cross onto my land, but they stood at the property edge, pointing and measuring like they were appraising an empty lot. One of them took photos. When I approached and asked who they were with, one replied, HOA Oversight Committee. I laughed in his face and told him to get lost. I have the right to document community initiatives, he said stiffly. Not on my land, you don't. This isn't your community. It's mine, and you're 1 step from a trespass charge. They left, slowly, smugly, but I got it all on video. Debbie filed the cease and desist formally that afternoon, along with a letter to the county clerk reiterating the legal boundary of my parcel and reminding them that the HOA had 0 jurisdiction. She also submitted a public request to see if any changes had been filed recently on my lot's designation. I've got a bad feeling about this, she said. You don't start inventing fictional land rules unless you've already set something in motion. I looked out my window at the fence. For now, it was intact. But I knew Hugh wasn't done, and I sure as hell wasn't backing down. I was in the garage oiling the hinges on my gate when I heard the unmistakable sound of wood splintering, loud, deliberate, and way too close. I stepped outside and saw a skid steer rolling across the southern end of my property, like it belonged there. Behind it trudged Hugh Jaxley, clipboard in hand, whistling like a man walking through his own damn pasture. 2 other men, younger and clearly hired muscle, were trailing behind him with work gloves and a pile of stakes. My fence, an 8-foot post and rail line that I maintained religiously, was already partially torn down, snapped like matchsticks where the machine had come through. I was halfway across the field before I even realized I'd grabbed my phone. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled. Hugh didn't even flinch. He turned to me with a relaxed smile like I'd just caught him rearranging my patio furniture. "Morning, Jason," he called. "We're just prepping the site. The goats need a dry shelter before monsoon season rolls in." "On my land?" "Well," he said, gesturing vaguely at the terrain around him, "that's still under discussion, legally speaking." "No, it's not." "Don't get worked up," he said, holding up his hands. "This is a community project. We've already notified the county, submitted intent to develop. You'll see, this will increase your property value. And think of the goodwill." I had the phone in my hand, still recording. I got close enough to catch the plate on the skid steer and then pointed back toward the broken fence. "You're trespassing. That's criminal mischief and property damage." "I think we're past that," he said coolly. "We've moved into easement negotiation. No easement exists. We'll let the courts figure that out." That's when he made his move. He pulled out his own phone and dialed. He turned slightly, facing away from me, but I still heard it. "Yes, this is Hugh Jaxley. I'm being physically threatened on my own land by a man with a weapon. He's unstable. Please send someone quickly." My jaw dropped. A weapon. The only thing in my hand was my phone. I turned my camera toward him and caught the tail end of his call as he gave my address. "You really want to play it like this?" I asked. He gave me the same grin as before, only this time with a flash of teeth. "It's not about playing. It's about proof. We're just getting ahead of things." 15 minutes later, the patrol car pulled up. Sheriff Richard McGill stepped out, hat low, hand already resting on the grip of his sidearm, just in case. He looked between us, at the skid steer, the workers, the busted fence, and finally at me. "Jason," he said, calm and measured. "You want to tell me what's going on?" I handed him my phone. "I've got video of them coming in. No notice, no permit, no right. This is my land. They tore through my fence and started prepping a site." McGill watched the footage. Hugh started protesting, calm, self-righteous, all full of legal-sounding nonsense about community usage and ambiguous jurisdiction. The sheriff shut it down quick. "Let me stop you right there, Hugh. I know this land. I know where the HOA ends. I've seen the deed myself. Jason owns this, clear and legal. You and your people are trespassing." "But I called you because he threatened me," Hugh insisted. "With a phone?" McGill asked. "I saw the video. You lied to emergency dispatch." "That's a criminal offense, Hugh." One of the younger workers started fidgeting. "We didn't know it was private, sir." "Yeah," I said. "You just followed the guy with the clipboard through someone else's gate and watched him tear down a fence." "Innocent mistake." McGill pulled out his own pad. "I'll be filing a report. Trespassing, property damage, false report to law enforcement. I suggest you pack it up now before it gets worse." To his credit, Hugh didn't push it further right then. He called off the equipment and walked the crew off my property like he was doing me a favor. But he didn't apologize. He didn't even look back. As they left, I saw something in his posture I hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not righteous fury. It was calculation, and that was worse. 3 days after Hugh marched off my property with his tail tucked between his legs, the letters started coming. The first envelope had the HOA logo again, same smug gold lettering. This time, it was a notice of violation. According to the letter, my property was in serious breach of community standards due to excessive overgrowth, visible detritus, and unsightly fencing. It included 3 grainy photos, none of which even clearly showed my land, along with a fine $1,200. The next day, another letter arrived, then another. Over the course of a week, I racked up more than $9,000 in fines for offenses like untrimmed vegetation, construction debris, and my personal favorite, failure to maintain harmonious boundary aesthetics. I wasn't even in the damn HOA. Debbie nearly choked on her coffee when I forwarded her the scans. "They're out of their minds," she said. "They have no jurisdiction. This is like a homeless guy fining you for not giving him a sandwich. Can we sue them for harassment? We're getting there. But first, I want to know what they're building, because they're not just sending letters. They're laying a paper trail." I walked the fence line again that evening, half expecting another assault with heavy machinery. It was quiet, but there were new survey flags staked a few feet inside my southern boundary. Bright orange nylon fluttering in the wind like some kind of warning. Or a claim. Debbie called the next morning. "I pulled your parcel history from the county land office. Something's off." My stomach tightened. "How off?" 2 months ago, an amended lot map was filed for your property. The shape's the same, but the southern boundaries shifted by about 30 feet. On paper, it looks like that strip Hugh tried to claim is now inside the HOA boundary. What the hell? It gets better. The amendment was submitted by the HOA with attached documentation verifying consent from the landowner. The signature on the consent form looks familiar. "Let me guess," I said. "It's mine." Sort of. A copy of it, anyway. From some old planning application you filed when you built the house. Cropped, scanned, and slapped on a new form like you signed it yesterday. I couldn't speak for a second. I just paced the kitchen in slow circles while she ranted. This is fraud, Jason. No question. We're dealing with document tampering, misrepresentation, and attempted theft of real property. I'm filing a formal complaint with the county recorder's office today. And I'm calling a title investigator. Later that day, I heard a knock on the door. It was Milton Carter, my nearest legitimate neighbor, old rancher, 82 years old, always wore the same sweat-stained cowboy hat and chewed toothpicks like a nervous tick. He tipped his head. Heard you were having some boundary trouble. News travels fast, I said. I've been here since they broke ground on Fox Hollow. That fence line's been where it is since '92. Saw the surveyors mark it myself. Got a copy of the plat in my shed if you need it. I nodded. Would you be willing to say that under oath? He gave a small shrug. Damn right I would. These HOA bastards think they run the whole county. I shook his hand harder than I probably should have. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone else to say it out loud. That night, I filed a formal incident report with the sheriff's office listing every fine and every boundary change I could document. I submitted my original deed, maps, and Milton's witness affidavit. Meanwhile, Debbie prepped a civil suit for fraud and unlawful interference with property rights. The next morning, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't a fine. It was a final warning. If I didn't pay my accrued violations within 15 days, the HOA would begin proceedings to reclaim and reintegrate the neglected parcel in accordance with community ordinance. They were going to try to take my land over my dead body. 2 days after the final warning notice, I got a call from Debbie. She didn't even say hello. I have the maps, she said. You're not going to believe this. She'd pulled the actual scanned submission from the county clerk's office. The map was a digitally altered version of the original plat from when I purchased the land. The southern border had been subtly nudged northward, and an annotation labeled the trimmed section as Provisional Community Development Space. On the bottom of the page was a stamped signature, someone I didn't recognize, James D. Halperin, Senior Land Surveyor. Alongside it, an HOA internal memo submitted as justification signed by Hugh. I didn't know the name, but I had a sinking suspicion we'd find him. And, sure enough, Debbie had already done the legwork. Halperin's a registered surveyor out of Boulder, she said. I called him. He's never done work for Fox Hollow Ridge. He agreed to meet with us. The next day, we drove to his office, a small converted craftsman off Pearl Street. The guy looked exhausted, gray-bearded, with nicotine stains on his fingers and a permanent squint. He sat down, glanced at the copy of the amended plat, and immediately muttered, "Son of a bitch." "That's your name and license number," I said, "but not your signature." He nodded. "Nope, that's a trace. I use a digital signature now. They lifted this off an old PDF of mine. Look, see the jagged edges? Somebody flattened a scanned image and pasted it onto this. Do you have any record of doing business with Fox Hollow Ridge or anyone named Hugh Jaxley?" "Hell no. This is pure forgery. You want a statement?" "Yes," I said. "I want you to burn them to the ground." He grinned. "I've been waiting for an excuse to report this kind of crap." He signed an affidavit on the spot, and Debbie added it to our rapidly growing legal file. When we got back to my property, I saw them. 2 signs had been hammered into the ground on the disputed section just past the broken fence. Same garish blue font as the HOA notices. Fox Hollow Community Agricultural Zone, Livestock Initiative, Phase 1. Underneath that, in smaller text, access authorized under Section 12B. There was no Section 12B. Not in the HOA bylaws, not in any zoning code I'd ever seen. It was complete fiction. I yanked the signs out of the dirt and threw them in my garage like trophies. That evening, Debbie filed our formal lawsuit against Hugh and the HOA, listing counts of forgery of a public document, intentional misrepresentation of land boundaries, fraudulent misappropriation, trespassing, civil harassment. She also filed an emergency injunction to block any further activity on the disputed land until the case was resolved. But that was just the beginning, because that night, someone left tire tracks on my driveway, not the usual kind. These were narrow, dual-wheeled, like those from a livestock trailer. They led right up to the garage, then backed out. No note. No goats. Just proof someone wanted me to know they could get close. I forwarded the footage to the sheriff's office and added it to the report. We weren't dealing with bureaucracy anymore. This had become war. It didn't take long for the injunction to hit. Sheriff McGill personally delivered it to the HOA office 2 days later. copy in one hand, clipboard in the other, cowboy hat pulled low. I don't know what Hugh expected, but the look on his face when the sheriff read the words, "Cease all action and vacate disputed territory immediately," was something I'll remember till the day I die. He tried to argue, of course. Claimed the HOA had autonomous authority under its charter. McGill just raised an eyebrow and said, "You want to test that in court? Be my guest, but I wouldn't recommend it." The workers were gone within the hour, the skid steer too. The field sat quiet again, wounded maybe, but still mine. Meanwhile, Debbie had filed for discovery. She wanted HOA emails, planning documents, internal memos, meeting minutes, anything that could show intent. And intent was exactly what we found. 1 week later, after a judge signed off on a limited warrant for document production, county deputies executed a search of the HOA office. It was a modest building, 2 rooms, 1 kitchenette, and an intern who looked like he was about to cry. They hauled out hard drives, computers, tablets, and, this was the kicker, a manila folder labeled Goat Phase. That night, Debbie called me with an edge in her voice I'd never heard before. "They're done." "What did you find?" "Emails. Lots of them. From Hugh, from the other board members. They talk about your land specifically. Phrases like, force easement, he'll cave under pressure, and my favorite, we can always say it was a clerical error if it gets messy." There were spreadsheets with line items like survey rewrite, $2,000, confirmed, and Halperin Sig, mock-up, complete. One thread was titled, "If Barrow Won't Cooperate." In it, they discussed fake violations, public pressure, even leaking false complaints to local code enforcement. One email chilled me. It was from Hugh, sent late at night, to the full board. "If we can't get him to play nice, we make it look like he's the aggressor. We've got the noise complaint logs. And there's always another 911 call if needed." They were planning to bait me, to provoke a reaction, to make me look unstable on paper. Debbie forwarded the full packet to the sheriff, the DA, and the state attorney general's office. It didn't take long after that. 3 of the HOA board members lawyered up within 48 hours. One resigned completely and sent a personal letter to the sheriff admitting she didn't know how deep the manipulation went. Another cracked during deposition and gave a sworn statement that it was all Hugh's idea from the beginning. But Hugh, he doubled down. The very next day, a glossy pamphlet was mailed to every home in Fox Hollow Ridge. Community Stand Against Property Blight. It featured aerial shots of my land, taken by drone without my knowledge, captioned with phrases like neglected, devaluing the neighborhood, and non-compliant adjacent owner. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. I took one look at the pamphlet and handed it to Sheriff McGill. "Want to know how I got these?" I asked. "Because if they flew a drone over my land without permission, that's trespass." He nodded slowly. "Looks like they just gave us probable cause for another warrant." Things weren't just escalating anymore, they were unraveling. The arrests began on a Monday. I was out front clearing brush when I saw the first unmarked SUV pull into Fox Hollow's main loop. A deputy stepped out with a folder in one hand and handcuffs on his belt. I didn't have to ask who the target was. By noon, Hugh Jaxley was in custody. Sheriff McGill didn't gloat, but when he passed by my gate later that day, he gave me a look that said it all. "We got him, Jason." And not just him. By the end of the week, 3 more HOA board members had been indicted, 2 charged with conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, the 3rd with obstruction of justice for deleting internal documents before the warrant hit. One of them tried to argue that she just signed what Hugh put in front of her. The DA didn't care. Signing off on fake violations, altered maps, and intimidation strategies wasn't something you walked away from with a warning. Hugh's list of charges was longer than a CVS receipt. Fraud, forgery, criminal trespass, misuse of emergency services, conspiracy to unlawfully acquire land, harassment, and falsifying municipal records. Debbie counted 11 felonies total, plus a stack of civil suits already in motion. But the real kicker was the testimony. At the preliminary hearing, the court heard from James Halperin, the surveyor whose signature had been forged. Calm, measured, professional, he walked through every line of the fake plat, pointed to the altered metadata, and explained exactly how it had been manipulated. Then Milton Carter testified. The judge had to ask him to slow down twice as he described the original boundary survey from the 90s, complete with dates, witnesses, and the fact that not a damn inch of that land ever belonged to Fox Hollow. Next came the intern, the kid. From the HOA office. Under subpoena and with a lawyer of his own, he admitted that Hugh had instructed him to backdate meeting minutes and delete metadata from scanned documents. The courtroom was dead silent when he read out loud from an internal HOA message board Hugh had set up. If Barrow doesn't fold by end of month, we file noise complaints, zoning reports, and call him in as a disturbance risk. Worst case, we take it. Through civil court, drag him through enough legal sludge to wear him out. When it came time for Hugh's attorney to respond, all he could do was ask for more time. The judge didn't give it. Bail was denied. Flight risk, they said. Too much at stake. Too many forged documents and, thanks to the drone, clear evidence of continued harassment even after the court had intervened. Meanwhile, the HOA was falling apart. The county issued a temporary freeze on all Fox Hollow HOA activities pending the outcome of the investigation. Bank accounts were seized. All enforcement powers were stripped and handed to a third-party receiver. Residents, most of whom had no idea what Hugh had been orchestrating behind closed doors, started showing up at board meetings demanding answers. A few even came to my gate, apologized, said they'd always found Hugh a little too intense but didn't think he was capable of fraud. One woman brought a pecan pie. Debbie smiled when she heard that. A pie? That's how we measure justice now? I'm not above it, I said, taking a bite. We still had a trial to go, but the structure had cracked. The lies were out in the open. The system had moved, and this time it was on my side. The trial wrapped just before Christmas. Hugh Jaxley sat through every day of it in a gray suit that got looser on him by the week. The smugness was long gone. His defense team tried the usual song and dance, miscommunication, clerical errors, overzealous but well-intentioned governance. But the jury didn't buy a word of it. They returned a verdict in under 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't mince words during sentencing, called Hugh a manipulative actor who weaponized community authority to pursue personal gain through deception, coercion, and outright criminality. Then he handed down the numbers. 23 years in prison, no parole for the first 15. The courtroom was silent, aside from the bailiff's voice and the soft whimpering of someone behind Hugh, maybe a relative. The other HOA board members didn't fare much better. 3 of them received sentences ranging from 7 to 15 years, depending on their level of involvement. One agreed to a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation and was placed under house arrest with 10 years of probation. As for the HOA itself, it was dissolved by court order. Its assets, every last dollar, were liquidated to settle legal claims. Fox Hollow Ridge was placed under temporary county supervision, while residents formed a new association, this time with mandatory oversight. I didn't ask to be involved. I had my hands full already. The civil judgment came 2 weeks later. The court awarded me $450,000 in damages, covering legal fees, property restoration, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Part of that came from Hugh's forfeited assets. The rest was taken from the now-defunct HOA's reserves, but the money wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the letter I received from the county recorder's office, an official certification stating that my parcel was now designated a Class 3 protected private holding. In plain English, my land was now marked on public record as immune from any future HOA jurisdiction, permanent, non-revocable. I had the metal sign custom-made the next day. Brushed aluminum, bold black lettering, bolted into a cedar post right at the edge of my gate. Private property, non-CHO jurisdiction trespassing will result in immediate law enforcement response. This land is not for sale. This land is not negotiable. I stood there for a while after I planted it, just breathing. Later that week, Milton Carter stopped by and dropped off a bottle of whiskey with a note that said, "Knew you'd out-stubborn 'em." Even Sheriff McGill made a rare visit, just to say congratulations and joke that if I ever ran for office, I'd have half the county behind me. As for Hugh's goats, confiscated, sold at auction, and transferred to a municipal livestock shelter. The money went toward repairing the fence he broke. Poetic. I still live here, still quiet, still private. But now, every time I walk the boundary line, I know that what I built, what I fought for, is finally mine in full. And that no one, not a man with a clipboard, not an HOA council, not a single smug bastard in a polo shirt, will ever try to take it from me again.